Mike Sullivan and Chris Drury meet with the media. Artemi Panarin talks contract extension, and Rangers training camp is underway.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1384 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we got a lot to do here today. I mean, honestly, when do we not have a lot to do? We're Ranger fans. There's always something going on, good, bad, or just downright bizarre, but mostly good stuff here today. We had Chris Drury and Mike Sullivan meeting with the media to discuss, among other things, the naming of JT Miller as the new captain of the New York Rangers. Some interesting quotes on that and some other topics as well. So we'll certainly discuss all that. We've got Artemi Panarin talking, I think, honestly, if not for the first time, certainly the first time in quite some time, about the possibility of a contract extension with the New York Rangers. Chris Drury weighed in on that as well. And then we've also got the first day of Ranger training camp. Sounds like it just concluded not too long ago. But we begin with Drury and Sullivan talking to the media specifically about the decision to make JT Miller the next captain of this team. They also go on to discuss the possibility of Mika Zibanejad continuing to play with JT Miller. But this is what Drury had to say about JT Miller being named captain of the Rangers. We thought it was the perfect time. We didn't have any interest in starting camp without one. He goes over the boards looking to get into the fight and drags people into it. That's what we need. And I totally agree. As I've said several times on here, JT Miller was my top choice to be the next captain of the New York Rangers. I can also acknowledge that there were some other candidates, namely Vincent Trocheck, maybe Adam Fox to a lesser extent, and that this is a roll of the dice. I mean, this is, I would think Trocheck maybe would have been the safer choice for captain, but when you've got one championship in 85 years, like I've been saying, not always interested in playing things safe. So for me, JT Miller being the captain has the most upside, and that term that Drury used was also echoed a little bit later by Vincent Trocheck, that JT Miller is the kind of guy that drags you into the fight with him. That's the kind of guy that you want as your captain, whether you're the Rangers or anybody else. But Drury was also, I don't know if he's asked about this or exactly what the question was, but he talked about the concept of just naming a captain in general and the importance of having one. This is what he had to say. I played a long time. Mike's played a long time. I think where this organization is at and where this team is at, I think it's an important role for a team. I really do. For us and for me and the process we went throughout the organization since Mike was hired and trying to make sure we got the choice right. If we didn't have the right person, we weren't just going to name anybody just to say we have a C. We felt we had a lot of good choices, and JT rose to the top of that list for us. And it's interesting hearing him talk about that. You know, on one hand, he's talking about how important he is, but then he also acknowledges that the Rangers weren't going to name a captain just to name a captain. They were going to have to feel really good as an organization collectively about their choice. And obviously they went with JT Miller. It's kind of interesting, though. It kind of got me thinking about the last two times that the Rangers didn't have a captain. Obviously, the most recent time was the majority of this past season. Once Jacob Trouba got traded, there was no captain, and boy, did that show. There was nobody really keeping the train on the tracks last season. So did this team hurt from not having a captain? I think at least a little bit it did. Maybe more so just a lack of leadership is what doomed them more than anything else. You know, general leadership, whether it's a captain or anybody else. But then you think back to the second most recent time this team didn't have a captain, and they were in the Eastern Conference Final in a season that everybody still thought they were rebuilding, and in a season where I don't think too many people picked them to make the playoffs, or even if you did, you probably figured they'd be out in relatively short order. So, you know, it's not like a prerequisite, in my very humble opinion, to have one, but I think you do want some direction. And when you think about what we saw from this Ranger team last season, we've talked about it over and over on here. This team needs more leadership. Now they've got the guy, the voice, JT Miller. Doesn't mean he has to do everything by himself, or nobody can step up and address the team, say something if it needs to be said at one time or another. But JT Miller is going to be the guy, and hopefully, the alternates, the other veterans in the room, will be there to also kind of guide the way for this Ranger team, specifically the young guys. Vincent Trocheck, this is what I was talking about just a second ago. He too was asked about JT Miller being named the new captain. This is what he had to say about it. And again, he used the same phrase, the same term that Chris Drury did. And you'll hear it in just a second here. This is what he had to say. He brings a level of intensity to the game that brings people into the fight a little bit. So having him back there to kind of lead the group is going to be good. And then Trocheck went on to say he was asked about the meeting that Drury had with Trocheck and the other veterans when he essentially broke the news to them that he was looking to make JT Miller the captain. This is what Trocheck had to say about that meeting. They kind of revealed it to us before they revealed it to everybody else. I mean, it's not on us to make a decision. It's up to them. Drury, is who makes the decision. Ultimately, him and Sully and the rest of the coaching staff got together a few times over the summer. It's not an easy decision. And yeah, I mean, it's nice to hear Trocheck, and I mean, this should go without saying, but he's kind of stating that it's not their decision to make. You know, certain players on this team last year, listen to them, some of the things they said, you know, after games and in press conferences and all this stuff. It feels like they almost believe that they have more power than they actually do. Now, it's nice to have communication. It does look like Drury is kind of met them halfway on some things, and he is kind of talking them through things that he's looking to do a little bit. But yeah, it's not their decision. It's up to the brass, the coaching staff, and certainly the front office as well. Mike Sullivan was also at the presser. He was asked about, you know, the importance of building a relationship with players, the importance of building chemistry with players. So he had to say about that. It was important that we started that conversation early. It gives players an opportunity, maybe in their own environment, where they might be comfortable and have a chance to share their insights on the group and how that could best serve me as the coach moving forward. And then he was specifically asked about getting the chance to meet with Mika Zibanejad prior to the start of really anything. I mean, we're going back, you know, at least a month at this point. I think it's about a month, give or take. This all blends together after a while, but it's been a little while. But Sullivan actually went to Sweden to meet with Mika Zibanejad, got to meet his family a little bit. And that's been obviously a big topic of preseason here. You know, Mika Zibanejad, how can they get more out of him? Is he going to be on JT Miller's wing, which is what I prefer? It sounds like it's what the Rangers prefer as well. Would he potentially center his own line? You know, what's the deal with Mika, basically? But this is what Sullivan had to say about meeting with Mika Zibanejad in Sweden. I just felt it was important that I started to build relationships with, in particular, the leadership to start with. I'm probably stating the obvious when I say Mika is a very important player on this team. He's an elite talent. We hope. He's an elite talent. My hope in going to see him was to get to know him a little bit, give him a chance to get to know me. I could share some of my intentions going into the season as the head coach and how I was going to approach this opportunity we have in front of us. And Sullivan went on to talk a little bit about, you know, getting to meet Mika's family a little bit and the importance of getting to know these guys on a personal level. And I agree, because, you know, these guys, it's got to be a brotherhood. The team that wins the Stanley Cup, whether it's this season, next season, 10 years from now, 10 years in the past, whatever it might be, very, very good chance that it's a close-knit bunch. I don't think it's a group of, you know, just individuals who just kind of punch in and punch out. I think these guys, it is important to build that chemistry, to get to know each other a little bit. Not saying you have to be absolute best friends with every single member on the roster, but there's got to be some sort of camaraderie. There's got to be that feeling that everybody's pulling in the right direction. And I hate to keep referencing last season, but anybody that watched this team last season, you could tell that wasn't the case. Something was just very, very off when it came to this Ranger team. So the more camaraderie, chemistry, unity, whatever you want to call it, the more this team can build, and the more it starts with the head coach, probably a better situation, the better the situation's going to be for this Ranger team going forward. Sullivan also mentioned that he envisions Mika starting the season in the top 6 on the wing. And this is something that isn't necessarily breaking news. We got a couple of Sullivan quotes a couple of weeks ago where he pretty much said that was his preference, and that's at least how they would start the season. Once again, with Mika on the wing, on a line centered by JT Miller. But this is kind of new, the new little wrinkle in this thing. It sounds like Mika Zibanejad and JT Miller have both told Sullivan that is their preference. And that is something that we kind of knew from Mika's perspective, but now we're hearing it from JT as well. And that's obviously good news, because those two certainly did click last season. And playing with JT Miller, it goes back to the quote, or the phrase rather, that Trocheck and Drury both used, you know, just yesterday, and in Trocheck's case today. JT Miller drags guys into the fight with him. I think that was certainly on display for Mika Zibanejad. And that's not to say everything was perfect, but when you look at Mika Zibanejad pre-JT Miller trade last season and JT Miller, or Mika Zibanejad post-JT Miller trade, it's night and day. The difference could not be more obvious. So I'm all for keeping those two together. Now, the one drawback, this is something that I haven't really talked about a whole lot as it pertains to putting Mika on a line with JT Miller. but it's something that's out there. It's something that if you're connecting the dots, you can kind of figure this out on your own, but it's certainly worth discussing. If you do put Mika with JT Miller, and this is still my preference, I'm not backing down from this at all, but one of the drawbacks for that is now your third line is, I don't want to say compromised, but in a way, yeah, kind of, because if you have all three of the Rangers centers separate from each other, and you have a line centered by Trocheck, a line centered by JT, a line centered by Mika, then you have your third line guaranteed to be centered probably by either Mika or Trocheck. And who else is going to be on the third line? Well, probably some of those young guys. Othman, he could very easily make the team. I think there's a good chance Berard will be there too, maybe Perreault at some point. And you have a difference between either being centered by somebody like Mika Zibanejad or Vincent Trocheck, or being centered by somebody like Johnny Brodzinski and Juuso Parson. And no disrespect to the last two players I just mentioned there, but there is a little bit of a drop-off when you look at offensive production and just what they've accomplished overall in the league. Now, it could still work. I mean, somebody like Brodzinski, I've been a fan of his. He stepped up in a leadership role last season and seemed to really kind of embrace the chance to kind of put his arm around some of the younger guys on this team. So maybe that would click even better. Back when Kaka was on the Rangers, we always saw he did better with like quote unquote role players than star players. So there could be something like that going on. We'll see. Also having Mika with JT Miller could potentially crack the door for Noah Laba to either make this team or be a call-up in relatively short order. We'll see. There's advantages and disadvantages to any alignment you can come up with. But I'll leave you for this portion of the episode here with one more quote from Mike Sullivan on Mika Zibanejad playing with JT Miller and how he envisions the ripple effect, essentially, throughout the lineup. Common sense would suggest that maybe we start there and see if that's in the best interest for the group. But there's always going to be that conversation of, do we put Mika on the wing or do we put Mika in the middle? If we put him in the middle, we arguably have three of the best centers, the 1, 2, 3 down the middle with JT, Mika, and Vincent Trocheck. In my mind, that's as good as it gets. The challenge is, do we have what it takes to surround them to create the balance we need and set them up for success? We're already having those conversations as a coaching staff. We've had some of these discussions with the players. And again, goes back to what I just said a second ago. Any alignment you can come up with, there's positives, there's negatives. But to start the season, at least, give me Mika with JT Miller. You can always adjust if you have to. Give them some leash, I hope. But yeah, I mean, I like that combination too much to, at the end of last season, to move away from it right at the start of this season. That's just the long and short of it. Let me know what you think, certainly, though, as well. So in just a second, going to keep everything rolling. Going to shift our attention to Artemi Panarin, if you can believe this, entering the final season of his 7-year contract. Still no extension, no real breaking news seems to be on the horizon of an extension. I mean, never say never. They do kind of tend to keep these things quiet, but we're going to discuss Panarin and the fact that this could be his final season with the Rangers and whether it should be or not, all that good stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you will get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is the best because it fits however you would like to bet. Whether you like player props, or you like to build a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live while the action is unfolding, they have got you covered. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your favorite team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It is quick, it is easy, and it is the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Big shout out to the everydayers. As always, thank you guys so much for continuing to support this podcast as we build toward Ranger preseason hockey and ultimately Ranger regular season hockey. And hey, in a best case scenario, Ranger postseason hockey as well. We will see. But for the everydayers, you guys are definitely going to want to stick around. I think tomorrow is finally the day. This episode has been recorded for like a week, but we're going to have Will Cooley, best and worst case scenarios. I really think tomorrow, Friday, is going to be the day that we release this episode. It keeps getting pushed back because there's more and more news as rookie camp starts, training camp starts, the whole 9 yards. So that'll be out on Friday for you guys. And then, of course, we've got the Rangers preseason opener against the Devils at 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. We'll have an episode covering everything that happens available for you guys by Monday at the absolute latest. And I have not seen a roster in terms of, which Rangers are going to suit up for that game and which ones aren't. But obviously, we'll keep an eye on that going forward as well. But for right now, let's go ahead, shift our attention to the Breadman, Artemi Panarin, discussing a possible contract extension. Now, he talked about it a little bit after the first training camp session, a little bit earlier here today. But yesterday, Drury had the first chance to address this situation and pretty much said what you would expect. It's basic GM talk, and I don't necessarily fault Drury for this. But he said that, he doesn't want to go public with contract negotiations for Panarin or for anybody else. He was asked about Panarin, though, going into the final year of his deal and whether the Rangers hope to, re-sign him soon and get an extension in place. And this is what Drury had to say about it. He actually, I think, volunteered a little bit more here than he typically does, although it is, in some ways, GM speak. But I'll let you guys be the judge. This is what Drury had to say. He's a huge piece of our team and our organization. He does not appear to me to be slowing down. He takes the offseason serious. He looks like he's in great shape and ready to go. As far as the contract stuff, I've said on record, and as you know, I don't get into negotiations publicly. Any conversations I have with Artemi or his representation will stay that way, just private between me and him. It would be nice to know if these talks are happening or not. And again, I get why nobody goes public with it. It doesn't really benefit anybody to air your dirty laundry. Not even necessarily that it's dirty, but I mean, it really doesn't benefit anybody to talk about it at any great length at all. There's not really anything to be gained by it. But Panarin was actually asked just a little bit earlier today, maybe about an hour ago, as I'm recording this, about his contract situation and if he would like an extension before the start of the season. This is what Panarin said. That's obviously good for everyone. Security. It's not my first year in hockey, so I'm used to it being in that situation. Not every year. It is what it is right now. Not complaining about that. I'm ready to work hard. And so, I mean, going by this, it feels like everybody's kind of content to just go into the season without one. I mean, we don't know how much they're telling us and how they really feel, but from what they've volunteered, it feels like everybody on both sides is at least somewhat content. Maybe the Rangers more so than Panarin, to let this season ride and just see how everything goes and cross that bridge when you get to it in the offseason. And I don't think that waiting would really hurt the Rangers that much. First of all, you got to remember the stacked free agent class next offseason is absolutely wild. No guarantee that all those guys make it to free agency, but at least some of them could. And you want to have enough cap space where you can make a run out of McDavid, a Kaprizov, an Eichel, a Kempe, whoever it might be. So there's that to consider. But there's also the fact that I don't think it hurts the Rangers to wait, because I don't think Panarin this season is really going to do anything to either help or hurt his next contract. Now, if he completely falls off a cliff, sure, but I don't expect that to happen. If he goes back to 120 points, sure, he would help his next contract in the opposite direction. I don't know if you can really expect 120 points from anybody going into a specific season. So I don't think anything's really going to change that much. And as I've said all along, I feel like Panarin right now for the Rangers is sort of their backup plan. And different people might feel different ways when I throw that out there. Some people maybe don't want any part of an Artemi Panarin extension. You just let him walk and be done with it. Other people might be mad that this isn't happening right now, that he's not already under contract, and maybe it's insulting that I consider him the backup plan. But when you've got guys like the players that I just mentioned as free agents who are all considerably younger and just now coming into their primes in a lot of cases, and you've got Panarin who will be in his mid-30s, I think it makes sense that the first group is a little bit more attractive as a free agent than Artemi Panarin. Now, maybe you can sign one of those big free agents and also re-sign Panarin, but as we've discussed, that will hinge basically on, what Panarin is willing to do. What kind of a contract is he willing to sign with the Rangers? Will he take at least a little bit of a discount? He had a massive contract here. He did have a little bit of a hometown discount the last time around, because at that time, the Islanders actually outbid the Rangers, but he decided that he wanted to be with the Rangers. So, we'll see. It all depends on what Panarin is willing to sign for. As always, it's going to come down to, is this worth it for the New York Rangers? Drury was also asked about the alternate captains that are currently on the roster, and essentially if there was any discussion, any thought of maybe shaking things up a little bit from that perspective and maybe going with some different alternate captains this upcoming season. Drury, though, this is per a tweet from Peter Baugh, said that there was no interest in taking away a letter from Fox or Panarin or Mika Zibanejad. He said that the team feels that they are good leaders and also that they believe that Trocheck deserved to be wearing a letter moving forward as well. Because as we know, obviously JT Miller's the new captain. Vincent Trocheck, one of the, well, really the only new alternate captain, once again joining Fox, Panarin, and Mika Zibanejad. But I couldn't have been the only person that thought this way. Drury's had a vote of confidence in the players that are alternate captains, and that's all well and good. And that might actually be true. He might actually still see those guys as very important leaders to this team. The number one reason why you did not see any of those guys lose their alternate captaincy, if we're being completely honest here, and I tweeted this out the other day, is Drury and the Ranger front office did not want to deal with that kind of a bleep storm right before the start of training camp. Because if you do that, I mean, first of all, the players themselves, we know that at times that this can certainly be a little bit of a sensitive bunch. If we're being perfectly honest here, we saw plenty of evidence of that this past season. But if you take away the alternate captaincy from Mika or Panarin, I mean, everybody's just going to be asking them questions about it nonstop. And we've seen in the past, we've seen players lose the captaincy on other teams. We've seen players lose the alternate captaincy, whatever it might be. But it's something of a distraction on those teams. But like here, like where everything is under a microscope with the Rangers, yeah, that would have been a massive storyline going into training camp. And these guys would have been asked questions about it pretty much nonstop. Drury would have been asked about it. Sullivan would have been asked about it. Any of the players, obviously, that lost their captaincy or alternate captaincy would have been asked about it. Their teammates would have been asked about it. The equipment manager probably would have been asked about it. So it's better off to just, I think, stick with how you have it moving forward. I know I floated out that idea of like just taking away the alternate captaincy from everybody from last season going into this one. And in a way, maybe that could have worked. But at the same time, I never believed the Rangers would do it. And deep down, did I really think it was a good idea? Not really. I had to throw it out there, though, just out of disgust from what we saw this past season. But yeah, this was always the most likely scenario. That everybody that was an alternate captain last season and is still on this team would certainly be an alternate captain this upcoming season as well. A couple other little tidbits here before we move on to the training camp highlights from the first day. This is per Chris Drury. Some news on Braden Schneider. The plan for Schneider is for him to play in 2 of the last 3 preseason games. Now, Schneider, of course, had offseason surgery. Once the Rangers were mathematically eliminated, that's when they pulled Schneider out of the lineup. He did not play in those last 2 meaningless games, which is obviously understandable. And he got the surgery. My understanding was pretty much right away. And so it sounds like they're going to play it like somewhat cautious with Schneider, and he'll end up playing in just 2 of the last 3 preseason contests, which I think is fine. Most of the veterans, most of the guys that have been around, I mean, I know Schneider's kind of young, but you know what I mean. He's been around for enough seasons where you could call him a veteran, but they don't need like to play in all 6 preseason games. I mean, you're going to see the veterans typically out there for maybe 3 preseason games, possibly 4, but Schneider playing in 2 of the last 3, I think that's fine too. He's been around for a while and knows what he's doing, and hopefully that's enough to get him up to speed and ready to rock for opening night. So yeah, that's where things stand with Schneider. Also, I thought this was nice. Chris Drury opened the press conference by giving condolences to Eddie Jacquemin's family. And obviously, Eddie Jacquemin passed away, about, I think it's 4 days ago at this point. And we did a tribute for him on the last episode of Locked On New York Rangers. If you'd like to see that, you can go back and watch that. But I saw a couple of comments from you guys in the YouTube section. A lot of Jacquemin fans for sure, and very understandably so. Just a phenomenal goalie, class act off the ice as well. But that was a nice way to start the press conference. So in just a second, going to keep everything rolling. But we're going to shift our attention to the first day of training camp. We had, a scrimmage, an inter-squad game, whatever you want to call it. And there's a lot of players there. I believe I have the number written down here somewhere. 59 players, I believe, were listed today, and they were split into 3 different teams. So we'll discuss some of the highlights and some of the takeaways from the first day of training camp. We will do that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people cannot name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL, monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off of your first year. That's 50% off of your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up this episode of Locked On New York Rangers by talking about what else? The first day of training camp and the no BS slogan that was sported by the players, or at least some of the players, when they were in the locker room. There were a couple of pictures of this circulating on social media. I'm sure some of you saw them as well. But basically, the Rangers right now as a team are sporting a training camp shirt. I don't know what's written on the front of it, maybe nothing, but on the back of the shirt, you've got a logo that says no BS. Or rather, I mean, it doesn't say no BS. It basically, there's a B, there's an S, right? So we know what that stands for. I'm not going to say it because I like my job, but it says BS. And then you've got that, red circle with the red slash through the middle of it, which basically translates to no BS. And I cannot think possibly of a better, more appropriate slogan for the New York Rangers to use than no BS. That is the way to go. No BS for this upcoming season. Please put this all over the Ranger locker room, everywhere, that everybody sees it every day. Put it on every guy's locker. Put it on the door when you walk in. Put it in the tunnel. Put it, you know what? Instead of the Ranger logo, put the no BS logo right in the center of the ice for opening night this upcoming season. Because, again, that I think basically is the perfect slogan to go with when you see what happened last season and when you try to turn the page for this season. Now, I might be reading into this a little bit too much. That is entirely possible. But I do wonder, first of all, I wonder who came up with that slogan. Was that the players? And if it was, is it possible that these guys are somewhat self-aware? They're acknowledging what happened last season. They're being accountable for what happened last season. And they're wearing the shirt as a way to remind themselves and remind each other that this BS isn't going to happen again this upcoming season. It's possible. Again, very possible that I'm reading way too much into what's basically just a swear word on a t-shirt. But I did have that thought, and I hope that is the case. I hope that they do acknowledge that everything went south last season and that everything that pretty much happened was unacceptable. No BS this season. Remind every player of that every single day, whether it's for training camp, the preseason, the regular season, whatever it might be. No BS this season. If you lose, but you better at least bring some effort. So Matt Rempe was asked about this, the mindset of the team. He also mentioned that he had added 12 pounds this summer. So that's, if you thought this guy was a Matt truck before, you're right, but he's got even more of one this upcoming season, you'd have to think. But this is what he had to say about it. Love that. I think it's just the mindset. Yeah, we're going to go to work. We're going to be mean. We're not going to take any bleep, and we're going to go hard. He did not say bleep, but again, I'm saying bleep because I figure we can go ahead and self-censor this episode here. But yeah, again, I was mentioning this a second ago. First day of training camp, you had 3 different teams. Team 1 had 18 players. Team 2 had 18 players. Team 3 had 23 players, which is a little bit odd, but I'm sure they have their reasons for breaking it down the way that they did. I think I just answered my own question. Team 1 and Team 2 were out there scrimmaging each other, and it sounds like everybody that wasn't in the scrimmage was on Team 3. But that's a total of 59 players listed in camp for the Rangers as of today. As far as which players were on which teams, I mean, I looked at the roster. I was going to share it for you guys, but unfortunately, I don't have it ready to go. I'm sure a lot of you saw it regardless, but there's not really any rhyme or reason to any of it. I feel like it's honestly just kind of a mix of veterans on this team, young guys on this team, a good blend of each. And maybe that's the way to go, because then if you're a young guy in camp, you have the opportunity to play both with and against veteran, more established NHL players. There's no real pattern to these 3 teams that I'm detecting. I mean, it seemed like the veteran NHL forwards were mostly on teams 1 and 3. The veteran defensemen were mostly on teams 3 and 1. And then the goalies, I mean, there were 2 per team. Igor was on team 3. Quick was on team 1. Garan was on team 2. So maybe those are kind of like the de facto starting goalies for all 3 teams. I mean, I don't know. I don't think there's too many conclusions to break out of this, but we will go ahead and talk about at least a couple of the highlights from, the scrimmage that happened here today, the line combinations and the defense pairing. So team 1, left to right, you had Panarin, Trocheck, and Radish. Panarin and Radish both ended up scoring goals in this scrimmage. Imagine the Rangers, like all this talk of who's going to play with who, and imagine Radish ends up with Artemi Panarin and ends up with 70 points this season. I don't think that'll happen. Either one of those things I don't think will happen, but you never know for sure. You had Brisson, Carrick and Rempe. Carrick and Rempe obviously know each other pretty well from the fourth line there. And then you've got what I think is going to be a Hartford Wolfpack line, Bleed, Terrence, and Fix-Wolansky. Fix-Wolansky is, like, as far as the pack goes, it's a big free agent get for the Rangers because he has lit up the AHL, hasn't played a whole lot in the NHL. Then defense pairings, Soucy and Morrow, Robertson and Borgen, and Dorrington and Schuster, who is in camp on a PTO. We have to talk a little bit more about Schuster. We haven't really gotten to that yet. I don't think he's going to make the Rangers. He hasn't played in the NHL in 3 seasons now, but never say never. It's at least possible. I thought maybe we would get Borgen with Susie, but whatever. Again, there's not a whole lot that you could read into these. The second team, team 2, line combinations, you got Edstrom, JT Miller, Mika Zibanejad. So JT and Mika are together. I'm telling you this upcoming season. Now, I don't expect him to start in a top 6 role. Do not sleep on Adam Edstrom. I've got him as a little bit of a breakout candidate. He's somebody that tends to fly under the radar a little bit for various reasons. But if he can stay healthy, that size and speed combination is flat out scary for opponents. And I think he could certainly make an impact for the Rangers this upcoming season. Then you had, I guess, on the second line here, Lafreniere, Dowling, and Othman. The third line was Sakura, Brodzinski, and McConnell Barker. And then the defense pairings, Vakanainen, Fitzgerald, Mackey, Vakanainen with Fitzgerald, Mackey with Passmore, Gonchar with McCarthy. And lo and behold, the first goal of Ranger training camp was scored by none other than Hartford Wolfpack captain Casey Fitzgerald. Just like we all predicted, that was the only goal that was scored by Team 2. We had Panarin tying it at 1-1 on a strong drive to the net. He scored on a redirection. Matt Rempe also scored to make it 2-1 in favor of Team 1. He also had a tough drive to the net, finished on a backhand. Brandon Othman was hit in the face by a puck for Team 2, skated off, but did return a little bit later because he's a hockey player. That's what they do. Sounds like this is a very physical, first day of training camp, which is good as well. And then, of course, I mentioned this a second ago, but Radish closed out the scoring. He got a goal to make it 3-1 in favor of Team 1. And I figure we can pretty much call it there for today. I'll leave you guys with one more quote from Vincent Trocheck, because I think this is kind of cathartic to hear this and turn the page from last season to this season. So what he had to say. It was a fresh start as soon as the season was over last year. I think we were all upset with the way the season went. And when the season was over, it was almost a sigh of relief to be able to have that fresh start, be able to get rid of everything that we had gone through throughout the last year. We knew what was going on throughout the year, that we didn't live up to expectations. Let the fans down, let ourselves down. Nice to hear him acknowledge that. But having that summer to kind of go back to the drawing board, having a fresh start, new coach, it's a new team in here, it feels much different. So, again, positive quote to end the day. We'll call it there. Once again, thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you all next